Welcome back to the Matinee, Kate.
Welcome back.
Today's going to be an interesting one. It's going to be a twofer on the topic of pedophiles. Are you okay?
yeah, I just kind of forgot about things that happened recently in life.
You better be prepared to get a little heated.
I'm already heated about my own personal situation.
In reference
to this topic.
I figured as much. So I've got two cases for us today. The first one is going to be about Jason Vukovich, also known as the Alaskan Avenger. 2 people in Alaska. Backstory on this one's kind of essential because it explains why Jason did what he did. Okay. And unlike most cases where the bad guy gets called by the last name, I'm going to call him Jason because I don't want to say Vukovich a whole lot.
It's such a fun name.
It's a fun name, but I've got the stutters, and yeah, I don't want to have issues. So Jason was born to a single mother in Anchorage, Alaska in mid-1975. He had a really rough childhood, and his mom actually married a man named Larry Lee Fulton when Jason was young. Larry ended up adopting Jason and his brother Joel when Jason was around 4 years old. But the problem is rather than getting like, ooh, I have a father figure now, they were like, ooh, this guy's beating the shit out of me all the time. Yeah.
Wow.
Not such a good
so
thing.
like
And the problem is this was both physically and sexually abusive. He was molesting both of them. And it's not something you would expect from a devout Christian family. Like
it's exactly what you would expect.
Well, in a letter that Jason wrote to the Anchorage Daily News following his arrest and everything, he actually was quoted saying, "Both of my parents were dedicated Christians and had us in every church service available 2 to 3 times a week. So you can imagine the horror and confusion I experienced when this man who adopted me began using late night prayer sessions to molest me."
I really do. Okay, see, the one thing, no hating on the actual religion of Christianity, but more so some of the people that do follow it, is the fact that it really do seem like the people are like, I hate the gays, are the ones that are also the men that are going and, like, molesting
Touching
children.
little boys, yeah.
Like...
But I digress. It wasn't until 1989, when he was 14 years old, that Fulton would actually get charged for everything about it. He was charged with second-degree abuse and molestation of a minor, but he was only sentenced to 3 fucking years.
That's fucking stupid.
It gets worse. For some unforeseen reason, Superior Court Judge Carl Johnstone decided that it was going to be a suspended sentence. So he got his sentencing, and then he went right home. She's shaking her head. Shaking her head and rolling her eyes and just general unhappiness. So Fulton went home and he kept being abusive and he kept beating Jason and Joel with belts and what was described as...
They just fucking sent him home to the same house with the kids? Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah. And he would beat them with a belt and he would beat them with what was described as a custom-made 2x4.
A custom-made 2x4.
I'm guessing he must have made his own paddle. But, like...
Yeah, that makes more sense. A custom-made 2x4.
Yeah, so he proceeded to keep being rapey with his late-night prayer sessions and shit until Jason and Joel decided to run away from home in 1991, which I think would have been around the time Jason was 16. 2 years. You don't need to...
Yeah, that would be about it. No, I'm just saying because I was remembering because you same age as my mom, so I was trying to figure out...
Oh, okay.
Because she graduated in 93. So I was trying... Yeah, the math checks out.
Right. And on a quick side note in relation to the abuse that they received from Fulton, at Jason's trial later on, Jason actually testified that he would often throw himself in front of his brother Joel in order to protect him from the beatings. And Joel actually testified of the sexual assault, saying, quote, "We'd roll over on the bunk beds and be up against the wall. It was my job to go first, so he would leave Jason alone." So, like, Joel would take the brunt of the sexual abuse, and Jason would take the brunt of the physical abuse, but they still both got beaten, and they still both got sexually abused. One was just worse off than the other, which kind of, I think, really goes to show, like, the incredible bond between the brothers. Like, they were trying to protect each other, you know?
Yeah, but then they were also kind of, like, I don't know. It didn't... I don't know how to word this. they were still getting like pretty screwed over in the situation. So
They were.
Like, I don't feel like it mattered if one was jumping in front of the other. I do think that they were.
Well, I think the thought of it may have been something along the lines of, I'm assuming the beatings happened first.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking the thought of it was, well, Jason got beat worse. He probably doesn't want to be fucking touched right now in any way, much less sexually.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
You know what I mean? So, as a teen with no ID and no diploma and no way to get a job, Jason managed to move himself from Alaska to Washington State. I'm not sure if Joel went with him to Washington State. It said they both ran away, but it didn't necessarily specify
that they went to the same spot.
That they went to the same spot, right. And Jason later admitted that the self-hatred that he'd been feeling since the abuse started in his childhood made it super fucking easy for him to just turn to petty crime.
Yeah, that checks out.
Super fucking easy. He almost immediately turned to thievery for survival, among other things.
Which makes sense.
padded out
Okay.
his rap
I mean, like, if you're, like, you gotta eat, you gotta clothe yourself and everything like that. Like,
So by the time Jason ended up moving back to Alaska in 2008, he had a record in Washington State, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and California, ranging in charges from theft all the way up to physical assault against his ex-wife, which he vehemently denies. I don't know whether or not he did actually beat her, but just to show that there was a variety of charges against him in a whole bunch of different places. And at this low point in his life, Jason later admitted in a letter that, quote, "I literally gave my existence no value or concern. I became a thief and a liar and went on to make many poor choices throughout my life." He basically did what he had to survive. Not to say that I'm... even Jason himself says, don't do what I did.
right.
So I'm not saying that he's an amazing person. I'm saying he had a really, really fucking hard life. So, in 2016, after he just kind of was perusing through the Alaska Sex Offender Registry, which is publicly available, and gives you names and addresses and things like that, Jason started making a list of sex offenders, male sex offenders that had offenses against minor children. And
I'm assuming the adoptive father probably was, like, dead by this point.
I'm not sure. I didn't really look into that.
I was gonna say, because you'd think he'd be on, like, the top of the fucking list.
Right. So that brings us to the attacks. So Jason had made his list, and he had a notebook that he carried with him pretty much everywhere. And he like, alphabetical, like, working on this list, right? So on June 24th, although it did say the 25th, according to one source, most of the sources said the 24th, so either June 24th or 25th of 2016, Jason knocked on the door of Charles Albee. Now, Charles had been convicted of second-degree minor abuse of a minor in 2003, and after forcing his way into the then 68-year-old Albee's home, Jason made him sit on his bed, slapped him around a few times, and said, well, I found your address on the sex offender list, and I know what you did, and he just robbed his house and left. He slapped him around a little bit, robbed his house, and left. So Charles Albee got off very...
He probably read the articles that came out afterwards and was like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, right? 2 days later at 4 a.m., Jason and two female accomplices used a similar method to force their way into the home of 25-year-old Andreas Barbosa. Now, Andreas was convicted of child kidnapping and possession of child pornography in 2014. And Jason forced him to sit down into a chair, called him a pedophile, punched him in the face a couple of times, and threatened to cave in his dome with the hammer because he had brought a hammer with him. He stepped it up a little bit, in a way.
A little more of a scare tactic.
Now, his two female accomplices both had jobs during this entire thing. One of them was kind of going around the house and, like, robbing shit, and the other one had her cell phone out. She's recording the whole thing.
Oh,
so
my
there's
God.
somewhere, there's video of Jason Vukovich beating the shit out of this dude and saying, I know what you did, and I'm going to make you pay.
Oh, Jesus, fuck.
Yeah. So they actually also ended up stealing his truck. Just casually. Now, Jason claimed at the time that he was, quote, collecting what he, meaning Barbosa, owed. That's something that Barbosa said that Jason kept saying to him was, I'm collecting what you owe. I'm
So kind of being like a Robin Hood figure in his mind.
That's the way it comes across a lot, and that's the way a lot of people treated it, kind of, in Alaska. I mean, through Alaska, it seems that he's kind of known as a hero, because he was like, these guys got off easy, and
Right.
and Jason went in there.
That's where like the whole like moral situation comes up, because like obviously like you don't want to justify violence and everything like that, but then at the same time, I'm not upset that a couple of pedophiles got their shit rocked,
Right. So on his third and most violent attack out of the three, Jason broke into the home of 68-year-old Wesley Demarest, who was convicted of attempted sexual abuse of a minor in 2006. Jason ordered him to lay on the bed, which he was like, no, I'm not doing that. And then Jason was like, well, get on your knees. And he was like, no.
No one.
So Jason, he wanted to make sure he was getting the right guy. So he's like, well, are you the registered sex offender, Wesley Demarest? And Demarest is like, well, yeah, I am. And Jason's like, well...
I'm sorry. In that instance, you go, no, I'm not.
Yeah, right.
If someone breaks into your house and they're like, are you this person? You'd be like, no, I'm not.
Right.
Like, what?
So Jason got that confirmation. He's like, well, you haven't paid enough for your crimes. Demarest was only he only served 9 months in prison and 3 years in a treatment program. The child that he abused was a kindergartner.
9 months?
9 months.
Fucking...
So
he was in jail long enough for another kid to be born, essentially.
Exactly. So that hammer that Jason liked came into play, and he hit Demarest 4 to 5 times in the head with the hammer, all while saying, quote, I am an avenging angel. I'm going to mete out justice for the people you hurt.
You think he came up with that on the spot?
I'm assuming so. Passion, heat of the moment, Yeah. So after stealing the
Very
valuables...
poetic.
Yes. So after stealing the valuables, including a laptop, Jason left Demarest in a small pool of his own blood. When Demarest regained consciousness, he called the cops, who almost immediately found Jason nearby, sitting in his Honda Civic.
Oh, fucking course it's a Honda Civic!
Yes. And he was sitting in there with the hammer, which I would imagine would have had blood all over it, as well as all of the stolen items and the sex offender list that he had made with those 3 names crossed off. As a result of his injuries, Demarest did lose his employment. Some sources that I found while researching this said that he was unable to speak incomplete sentences due to brain damage caused by the attack. And I'm not doubting that he was injured, but he did a lot of interviews throughout everything.
Yeah.
So I think he could talk just fine. It probably just took him a minute to get the sentence out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it was just like, okay, well then now, fuck, it's like how I talk, god damn it.
Right. So, a lot of the interviews that he did pretty much said that the attack had pretty much destroyed his life. He lost his job. He wasn't able to do a whole lot. And he said that he had been regretting his own crimes for the 11 years since his crimes had happened. And I don't know whether or not he was truly remorseful or not.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read this exactly the way I wrote it in my notes, because I got heated writing this notes. So.
Oh, no.
Whether or not he is truly remorseful, raping a fucking child isn't something that you can just whoopsie away. That's a justified giggle.
You can't fucking...
Like, you can't just whoops, I'm sorry.
It was an oopsie-whoopsie, I'm sorry.
Exactly.
No, like... If you didn't fucking bediddle a kid, I'm sorry, this dude wouldn't be on your doorstep beating your head in with a hammer. I'm sorry. I mean, that doesn't justify the dude beating your head in with a hammer, but still.
Nothing really does, and even Jason says that himself.
Oh, right. But clearly Jason had like a mental snap, and he was just like, this.
He admitted later on that he probably had a significant amount of PTSD.
Oh, without a fucking... If he
yeah.
didn't have PTSD, that'd be more shocking.
Exactly. So, out of the 3 victims and general public, Demarest's voice is the loudest in basically saying, I'd prefer it if he was still in jail. I don't want him out while I'm still alive, type of thing. Even the other 2 victims, from what I saw, like, they were upset that it happened, but they were like,
They made it out fucking easy, though.
They did make it out fucking easy. Let's be real. So
the first dude was probably, oh, no,
right.
I think I'm okay.
So obviously Jason was arrested when they found him in
Right.
his Honda Civic after the Demarest attack. And after that, he was charged with 18 counts of assault, robbery, burglary, and theft. Initially, he pled not guilty to that, but he later opted to make a deal with the prosecutors.
Right.
He ended up pleading guilty to first-degree attempted assault and a consolidated count of the first-degree robbery. And in exchange for this, the prosecution dismissed over a dozen other charges that they had originally
Attempted
had
assault
lined up.
is interesting. Because I think he didn't just attempt. He succeeded in assaulting that man.
I think so, but the prosecution took the bait, so they went for it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was probably just the way that if they did it that way, it was the only way that they could get rid of the other ones and not have it be as bad on his record.
Either way, he ended up still getting some shit on his record.
Right.
But in the entire course of the trial, and in a letter that he wrote to the Anchorage Daily News, he wrote a huge letter. I believe you can find it online in its entirety. He urged people not to follow in his footsteps. He said flat out that he regretted throwing his life away for something like this because in the grand scheme of things, it seemed so small.
Right.
And he didn't want to see more people end up in the same situation he had, despite any abuses that they might have also endured as a child, because he was like, I was young when I came in here, and now my life is pretty much just prison for the rest of everything. Like, I could have been something. I got so caught up in everything. And,
So
and the
how long?
PTSD
Right. How long did he get?
Sure.
Oh,
In like 2 seconds. Give me 2 seconds.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In 2018, Jason was sentenced to 28 years in prison,
Really?
with 5 years suspended and 5 years on probation. Now, the thing about his sentencing is initially he said that in his deal with the prosecution, he basically said, I will happily take the charges of the men that I assaulted and serve their time as well, including of his stepdad. He said he wanted to serve the 9 years that his stepdad should have gotten and the years that the other guys should have gotten instead of whatever.
That's weird. Is that just a weird sense of like
the way he said it? I just didn't think to find where I found it. I believe it was on the EWU episode on this. I think they did an episode on this.
Was
and
it
that's
just
what caught
kind
my
of
attention.
like, if someone's gonna do time, I'll like if there's time that still needs to be done, I'll like pay the debt essentially. I feel like that's what he's
in
trying
a way.
to,
I
like,
think
say.
that's what was trying to come across. And
Which even then, like, that's not your time.
Mhm.
Like, you weren't the one touching kids. You were a victim yourself. Like, it's not.
But maybe it's kind of like he feels like that debt is still out there, and
Maybe that's just his way to get closure
it's
for it.
It's possible that he felt that because he went and beat the shit out of those guys, that they paid their dues because he beat the shit out of them, and now he's willing to take on their time to balance the scales, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because he had that 5 years suspended, in a lot of the articles that you read or interviews with him or anything like that, they'll say 23 years that he was sentenced to because the 5 years suspended.
Right.
Just to clear up that confusion a little bit, it maths out realistically. In a 2020 appeal over the length of his sentence, Jason actually cited his PTSD as a factor that should have been considered in his case due to the years of abuse that he had experienced. Exactly. And despite a doctor's testimony, the appeal was denied due to, quote, insufficient information demonstrating that he was under stress, coercion, threat, or compulsion when he committed the crimes. And the judge proceeded to say, vigilantism will not be accepted in our society. Which, I understand that, and even with the PTSD, I do understand the judge saying that, he was under no direct threat from these people. He felt like he needed to go out and do something. If he had gone out and attacked his stepdad,
yeah,
like, they would have been like, I get it. He abused you. You abused him. Makes sense.
Yeah. Or it'd be like, oh, maybe his dad, like, tried to get a hold of him or something like that, and that could have triggered something. Then it'd be like, okay, that's all right. You were stuck in this, like, haze, and you didn't really know exactly what you were doing.
Exactly.
And, like, I'd be like, okay,
like
then
a
this
fog.
makes sense.
They call it a fog of war.
Mm-hmm.
So through the entirety of this case, there's been ongoing support in favor of Jason, with Free Jason Vukovich trending for a while on social media. His sister, I believe, runs a Facebook and Instagram page for that. And there's also online petitions vying for his release. In 2023, he became eligible for parole, which was actually granted.
Wow.
Kind of.
Well, obviously, he's going to have, like, a lot of fucking...
That pesky 5-year suspended portion of his sentence came back into play, so despite the fact that he was granted parole, he's got to sit 5 more years before he can get out for that parole.
So he's guaranteed
he's
parole.
Guaranteed parole, but he's got to finish that 5 years suspended before he gets to go back or go out.
Which, granted, he probably thinks is
he's
not
totally
long
fine
enough.
with it.
Yeah. I feel like even in his mind, if... in his mind, if he wants to, like, take off, like, everyone else's, like, sentencings and everything like that, he probably just kind of thinks that it might not be long enough for himself.
Well, he was also getting help with the PTSD in his time in prison, so he actually, he changed a lot in his time in prison, despite being absolutely blanketed in tattoos. Like, he had no tattoos, I don't think, or very few tattoos when he went in, and he absolutely covered in them now, including some on his face. A lot of people think that he joined a gang or something like that, and he's just like, no, I like it.
Which what else are you gonna fucking do in prison? You're like, oh shit, you want to practice your ink? Yeah. Do they? Here's the thing: are they all like poke tattoos? Or,
I'm not sure.
Or
I didn't look into it.
I'm wondering, because it's not like always what fucking like. Obviously, poke tattoos.
They don't all have to be poke tattoos.
Right,
you can make
like,
a tattoo gun in prison.
I was gonna say, who the fuck brought in a tattoo gun?
You don't have to bring one in. You can make one out of a lot of stuff. I made one before I bought one. So, despite many Alaskans hailing him as a hero, Jason does not feel that way at all. He was also quoted saying, "Heroes are made only by popular opinion, and usually from the scantiest materials." In a message to the public, and perhaps a true showing of how much Jason has changed since the attacks in 2014, he wrote in a letter, "I am a simple man, and this life has both humbled and empowered me in many ways. Though I continue to be a flawed and imperfect individual, I have grown to consider others based on their hearts and their actions, and to me, work is equal to prayer. I am precisely the sort of person who would give up his freedom and happiness for the sake of a child with no regard of their race, creed, or nationality. Other people seem to have too much to lose. My own life and how it should have been taken from me by a convicted child molester when I was very young. So I went out and I put in the work and I did what I felt was necessary and appropriate." So, like I've always said on this podcast, I don't really feel like it's good to glorify the bad guys, but this is kind of a rare exception. Because, I mean, he became a better person through the course of his prison sentence. He realized almost immediately that what he did was not necessarily the right thing to do.
Yeah. And he's really like... And, like, thank God that he didn't actually kill anybody, because I think he would have...
I don't think he ever wanted to. I think that he would have felt that killing them would have been too easy on them.
I feel like the one dude only got hit with the hammer because I feel like he probably went into a PTSD kind of, like...
Well, that, and my understanding from everything that I read on the attack against Demarest was that Demarest was very vehemently, like, resisting. And I think the hammer was just kind of like a, listen to me, like, you know? Just shut up.
Stop fucking touching kids.
Exactly. This episode of the Massacre Matinee is not sponsored. However, I feel like BetterHelp is something that can probably help you. BetterHelp is available online, and it's a way to get the therapy that you might need in a way that's easy and convenient for you, and you don't even have to leave your home. Check out BetterHelp to get the therapy that you probably need, because... let's be real, we all need a little therapy sometimes. Now, over the course of researching this case, I managed to find another case, which I messaged you about. I fell down.
You're like, I'm in a rabbit hole. Help.
I fell down a rabbit hole. So, to finish this on the topic of pedophiles, episode 2, I'm going to tell you about Christopher Mirasolo. Now, this particular case, there's almost nothing that I can find about it.
Right.
Because of there wasn't a whole lot of media on it. They wanted to protect the minor that was involved in this. So this happened in downstate Michigan.
Fucking course it did.
And like I said, I don't have a whole lot of notes on this, but I've got this weird thing of writing my notes like an essay. So
Makes sense.
I'm going to read my notes as they are. You feel free to
I'm
pop
back
in.
in fucking English class. Let me get comfortable. Hold
you
on, my
feel
mic's
free
also
to
fucking
pop
doing
in
shit. All right.
whenever you like.
Cool.
So, Christopher Mirasolo and that time that Michigan fucked up.
I fucking love this title. Oh.
In
this essay,
in some real downstate Michigan fuckery, a Sanilac County judge consented to joint custody between a rapist and his victim. I will say that again. Joint custody between the rapist and the victim. She's making faces. Do you need to say something before I continue?
I will say something because I feel like I should bring up my father in this.
He's gonna get his own episode when he's dead.
Yes, but yeah.
You can bring up things that sort of relate, but don't give up too much information about your father because he will be a case.
Judging by his mugshot, dude, it doesn't look like it's gonna be long.
Good.
I'll just say that my dad was recently arrested for things that he did.
Years ago.
In some cases, almost over 30 years ago, and then in another case, only 8 years ago.
So he had a criminal career spanning the course of the better part of 20 years.
Oh yeah, because then also in like 2019, he also had another thing.
Oh, even better.
I'll fill you.
He's
I'll
a
fill you
terrible
in
person.
after. Yes, very much. He is my sperm donor. I do not refer to him as. Well, I refer to him as my father, but he's not my dad.
Right, exactly.
Anyway, continue.
So in 2008, Christopher Mirasolo, then 18, held Tiffany and another girl against their will in an abandoned house for 2 days. Tiffany's last name was never given. I was only able to find her first name in one singular article. They did this to protect her.
Mm-hmm. And that might not even be her real name.
I believe Tiffany is her real first name, but they didn't want the last name out. So they were held in an abandoned house for 2 days with no food, no water, getting raped frequently. Now, I believe there was more than just Christopher there, but Christopher was the main one that was brought up. Following the rapes, Tiffany found herself pregnant a month later at 12 years old. It wasn't until the pregnancy was discovered that Mirasolo was ever even arrested for the attempted first-degree criminal sexual conduct.
Are you
Except
fucking
she was
kidding
pregnant, so how was it attempted? Yeah. This is that time that Michigan fucked up. Like, so
what year was this?
The rapes happened in 2008.
Okay, this is before, like, okay. This is before our current governor that did a whole bunch of, like, women's rights stuff, so this makes sense.
So through the course of the rape trial, authorities were working to plead down the severity of the case because they were bound determined for some reason that it was consensual sex. Even though the consensual age in Michigan 12. Is 16.
She is 12.
She is 12.
Homegirl saw her first period probably not like 6 months before this.
Right.
And then...
So because they worked so hard to plead down the case severity, he only sat 6.5 months. Yeah. In a county jail, not even in prison.
Oh my God.
County jail.
Jesus!
After a later second rape conviction, he actually served some prison time. But out of the 25-year minimum that he should have received between the two...
If it's under 10 years, I'm fucking screaming.
Please don't scream.
Oh, no.
He got off lucky with a total of 1 year sentenced, and he only served that 6.5 months. Tiffany and her family were initially told, well, first-time offenders aren't sent to prison because they usually come out worse than when they went in there. He had multiple rape charges at this point.
Happy thoughts, happy thoughts.
So that's the portion that talks about the rape as it happened. 9 years later, October of 2017, joint legal custody and parenting time of the now 8-year-old boy was awarded to Mirasolo in what was pretty much just called protocol at the time. You see, Tiffany had applied for state aid. She said that she was getting $260 a month for food stamps, and she was getting state health insurance just for her son, just to make sure he had health insurance kind of thing. And according to Mirasolo's attorney, he never initiated the effort for custody. It was just kind of something that was routinely done in cases like this where a single mother was applying for state assistance. When it came up that Mirasolo was indeed the father, it was just quicker and easier in the court's eyes to be like, oh, well, you can have custody too. So, well, they granted him parental rights, but it's generally believed that the judge that signed and said, hey, he can have parental rights was kind of blind to some of the facts. They don't think that he actually knew that Mirasolo was her rapist.
Right.
Sort of thing.
Unless she brought that up. I don't think he would have looked into that because in his mind, like, they see so many of those cases.
With all of this wasn't like a before the judge kind of thing. No. This all happened behind the scenes.
Right, and so they're not looking at any of that.
Not only did the judge not really look into anything very well when he was doing his work, but because of the efforts of all of the previous attorneys and prosecution and the police and everything to try and downplay the rape charge, there wasn't a whole lot on it.
Right, but she should be able to go and like basically appeal it and sit there and through the custody court.
The last thing that I was able to find about this was that a hearing was scheduled to review the decision to award custody, but I haven't been able to find anything further on that.
We probably won't find anything with that. Family court's usually pretty locked up tight about that kind of stuff.
And that's what I'm thinking. So I hope that Tiffany gets solo custody because no rapist should have custody of their rape baby.
Once they look into it, I'm fairly certain that a judge would probably be like, yeah, no. Because they also look into the fact if the father's been present in the life, whether how the person was convinced or not.
If you're attempting to get, like, one of my friends in Wisconsin had to deal with this with her first baby daddy. Her oldest daughter was not allowed to have contact with him for over a year. If he didn't make any effort to contact her for a year, she basically was awarded the full custody in that regard because she made so many attempts, and it'd be like, 3 more days, and then the phone would ring kind of thing. So he was keeping track of it kind of thing, and I'm not sure how that works in Michigan.
It's kind of similar. This would be probably a really good question for my mom, because my dad, I think he's still technically... So with my dad, the whole situation, it wasn't like he had court-ordered visits. It was like if my mom decided that I was allowed to go visit, then I could go visit.
Okay.
Because, well...
Stuff was happening. You'll see it in a later case.
So even if he has parental rights, it doesn't necessarily mean that he gets to see the kid. So, not that he would probably want to. Unless he has this, like, power hold over her and just, like, wants that power, then, like, maybe. If he's smart, he won't fucking fight it. If he doesn't want all this shit that he did back in 2008 coming back up, he won't fucking fight it.
Well, his attorney did say that he made no effort to initiate any of that. I don't even necessarily think that he knew.
He probably was just as surprised as she was.
Until his rape trial, I don't think he knew she was pregnant.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So, he was. If she hadn't turned up pregnant, that means he wasn't even going to end up getting charged.
No, so he probably doesn't like the fact that there's a kid.
Right.
And here's the thing. If he does want to keep his parental rights, and honestly, you know, I never thought I'd like say this, if he was fucking kind of smart on his end, he would sign off his parental rights right away, because otherwise he's going to get slapped, because Michigan does do this. He's going to get fucking slapped with back child support.
Oh, yeah.
So,
oh, yeah.
And they go fucking crazy, because like what my dad did, he was like, oh, I'm not going to fucking pay child support. And then he'd wait until he had a court date, and then he'd pay the minimum. So then they canceled the court date.
Just enough to stay out of jail.
When I turned 18, he had like over $5,000 that he still owed on me. And then with my brother, he owed like over 10. And they just kind of like were like, the state of Michigan's like, I don't want to, like, we don't fucking want to deal with this dude anymore. And just like didn't make him pay it.
I'm sick of this.
And it got to the point where he changed jobs, but he wouldn't like tell the courts that he changed jobs, so then his checks wouldn't get garnished, because they started to get garnished.
Well,
yeah, so
keep an eye out for Kate's dad's case.
Oh fucking god, we're gonna have to get my family here, because they got some fucking stories, and I'm glad that none of my other family listens to this, and if they do, well,
now you know.
I only met you guys when I was 2, so I don't fucking know.
What the fuck ever, bro.
Nope.
So I wanted to give you guys real quick before we finish off this episode a rundown of what holidays we're doing this year. We did mention that we were going to start.
I love the fact that there's a spreadsheet on the table right now.
There is. It's a beautiful spreadsheet.
It's color coordinated.
It is color coordinated. So we are going to be bypassing the generally American holiday of the 4th of July, because I want the fucking summer off from all of the extra research.
Yes.
So
we're going to be doing a lot of hiking.
Yes. So for February, we've got Chinese New Year, Mardi Gras, Valentine's, and Leap Day, because it's a leap year this year. And then going into March, we've got St. Patrick's Day and Easter. For April, we're just doing April Fool's Day. For May, we're doing Cinco de Mayo, because I wanted something for May and it sounded fun. And then we're going to take the summer off from the holidays. But coming back in October, we're going to do Oktoberfest and Halloween, Thanksgiving for November, and then Christmas and back to New Year's.
I guess the only summer holiday that we'll be celebrating
is our podcast birthday.
We're gonna be and we're getting a cake.
And you know how
I know
we're
you're
gonna,
trying to
you
like
know how we're gonna celebrate our podcast birthday.
Oh no,
Jonestown. We're gonna officially start the Jonestown case.
Would it be really bad if I asked the bakery in town to put "Happy Birthday, it's Jonestown time" on a cake?
I think it would be acceptable if you got them to put the logo on it. If we get a cake made for the podcast birthday, which I shouldn't say if. We're getting a cake made for the podcast birthday, and there will be a picture posted on our social media, Facebook or Instagram.
We'll have a little check
us out.
That bitch falls on a Friday.
To work.
Yes, because
you know the podcast birthday itself does fall on a Friday.
I fucking love that.
Which is pretty fantastic.
We'll have to bring cookies or cupcakes or something like that for Penny. Because, see, our whole podcast started with like a whole bunch of our coworkers listening to it. And, you know, shout out to them for getting us started.
So, I hope I didn't get you guys too heated on the topic of pedophilia. I know Kate did, and I did doing the research. So, we will see you guys next week. Maybe calm it down, cool it down a little bit. Kate's going to do a couple of cases for us, because I've got to get ready for 3 holidays in a row.
Especially with Mardi Gras and Valentine's Day on the same day.
I already know. Well, actually, Mardi Gras and Valentine's Day are not the exact same day. I thought they were, but Mardi Gras is the 13th this year. Oh,
so close enough, especially with how long Mardi Gras goes.
And I have into Valentine's Day. Of the cases for the holidays figured out in advance.
I have.
Except for New Year's for next year. Do you want to do Christmas's case? Do you know what Christmas's case is?
What's Christmas?
John Benet Ramsey.
Fuck yeah, that's been on my list for so long. I was actually kind of
until the end of the year to do your research.
Here's the thing. I think that was one of the first ones I wanted to get into. I was like,
that's why I was like, bitch, we're doing it.
And then I was like, well, oh god, it's so fucking much because there's so many documentaries that I have to watch, and I'm like.
So we'll see you guys next week, hopefully with something a little more calm.
Bye.